I'm gonna start off by saying I don't really love this one, like I don't think it turned out that well, but I think it's important that I show off studies that I don't do so well on because I mean so many of them don't turn out that good, but I tend to record a lot of my studies in full because I use them for my TikTok videos, so a lot of the times these studies are intended to be content and I don't want to just throw away all that footage because I didn't like the end result that much. And of course, it's really important to talk about failures and discuss failures and show them online. I am skipping the sketching part of this, if only because I was watching a little video in the corner and I don't think I should show that at all, because obviously it wasn't my footage and I feel like that's breaking some copyright rules. The reason I think this study didn't go nearly as well is because I was using the thin gouache brush instead of my oil painting brush. And my thin gouache brush is really good for refining details and making more refined work, but it's not so good for the looseness you kind of need for doing a quick study. If I was gonna sink more time into making this, I could have used the thin gouache brush, but again, I do keep these studies to like 30 minutes, and that really isn't enough time for me to use a brush that's made for more fine detail work, especially because I sort of made everything a little too tight or a little too strict, and so the end result was kind of robotic, or I don't know, it looks a little weird. And I didn't spend enough time perfecting the sketch, so her entire face shape is a little bit incorrect, and that carries over towards the end of the piece. And I think it's so obvious when I'm looking at the photograph now, but I think I did this study kind of late in the day and I wasn't thinking about it. I really think something I need to put a heavier focus on is putting in my darkest values as soon as possible. I tend to wash out a lot of my pieces. The way I've always done studies or any type of drawing is to put down the midtones and then add in the darker darks and the lighter lights, but I don't think I ever go truly dark enough, and that's because I'm focusing too much on the midtones. So either I need to adapt it so my midtones are more representative of my actual image, or I need to go very dark with my darkest tones and hope that everything works out later. I think also doing these voiceovers and watching my own process helps me assess where I need to fix things and help me see where I have my own flaws in doing my artwork. This is sped up by about 8 times, so it is a little faster than my other process videos, but not by that much, and I think had I let it go on for longer periods of time, I wouldn't really be able to assess these changes that I'm looking at now. When I use the thin gouache brush, I think I struggle with detailing too early on. Because the brush is kind of a flat brush with sharper edges, it means I can't soften things as easily, and even if I switch to the lighter version of this brush, which has more blenderly settings and less hard edges, the brush itself is just pretty precise, and that makes it a little more difficult to really commit to darker colors or different blending modes. And it almost creates harsh edges between color transitions even if I blend things because of that flat edge. So it creates a puzzle piece-esque type of look to the drawing, which looks kind of bad. And again, I do think this is in large part my inability to really commit to darker, cooler tones on the face. I should probably do more value studies in just black and white, but I think they look so boring. Or it feels a little too fast or easy, I don't know. I'm generally good with color on paper or canvas, but when it comes to digital, I struggle a little bit with getting the accurate colors. And they're definitely not as cohesive because when mixing paint on a palette, you actually get to mix the paint live and see what colors you're using and sort of make a more cohesive palette. But when you're doing something digitally, you kind of just have to hope that you have a cohesive color choice. And there are ways to make a more singular palette with digital work, but I tend to just color pick, or not color pick, but I mean pick my colors at visual appeal. And inevitably that means my tones and coloring palette are a little all over the place, which is entirely my fault, as there are ways to make sure you have a very relative color palette. I don't know, I don't do it very well digitally. This is the point where it's like a turning point where the drawing starts to look kind of good, but if I compare it to the image, it's very clearly off. I made a lot of my edges far too sharp. I mean, Kristen Stewart was like 20 maybe during the filming of this movie, so she has a slightly soft face, but I definitely made the edges too hard, and I didn't really soften a lot of my edges on the shadows despite this being a dimly lit area and scene. And my brightest parts are way too bright, my midtones are still way too bright, and I'm so used to painting with oil paint that using any type of digital medium, I still try to mimic that feeling, even though digital art cannot do the same thing that paint can do, which is layer and create translucencies in specific ways. It always feels like I'm so much better at traditional artwork than I am digital artwork, but my access to traditional artwork is a lot smaller than my access to digital artwork right now. And I have so many digital art tools that I inevitably use them more anyway. Anyway, looking at this now, I really feel like a lot of the weirdness when you look at my study is with the eyeballs. They're definitely pointing in different directions, and while it is true that eyeballs push a certain way a little more than the other depending on where you're looking, I definitely exaggerated it. And that is a little embarrassing to note now. I also definitely tilted the face more than it is tilted. And this is more a result of me not flipping my image back and forth to check what's going on because I wanted the recording to look a little better. When I first started making speed paints, which are all privated, unlisted, or deleted by now, I spent a lot of time rotating my canvas and flipping my canvas and moving everything around, and that creates like a very jank video, and it's not a visually appealing view for any audience members, so due to that I try to not rotate or move my canvas that much. I don't zoom in that much when I record. I definitely do a little more when I'm drawing on a computer. I'm less concerned or aware with the screen recording, but if I'm recording on a smaller screen or I plan to make content out of the video, and I know I will, I'm definitely a lot more aware of the recording, and I definitely am more careful with rotation or zooming in or flipping my canvas. And of course that does cause problems. Also, I'm not sure if you noticed, but you can see here that I'm trying to blend out my midtones a little better and darken some parts. It's because I realized what the problems were, but I kind of realized late and at the point where I was kind of almost done with the study, so a little too little, a little too late, I guess. But that is all. Thank you so much for watching.